Welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast, where today's brightest minds in the medical device industry go to get their most useful and actionable insider knowledge direct from some of the world's leading medical device experts and companies.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Etienne Nichols. I'm the host of today's episode. In today's episode, we got to speak with Brittney McIver in this Meet a Guru episode. If you've been following the podcast very long, you know sometimes we bring on a medical device guru just to introduce who she is, what she does, he or she, depending on the case. In today's episode, we get to speak with Brittney McIver. Brittney McIver is a medical device guru at Greenlight Guru. Our medical device gurus are part of what we call the Guru Edge here at Greenlight Guru. And as a medical device guru, Brittney helps guide companies through the various quality and regulatory requirements and challenges that are unique to MedTech companies and medical device professionals, such as quality management system implementation, for example. Brittney has a bachelor's degree in biological science and a master's degree in bioengineering from Clemson University. She is also an ISO 13485 lead auditor and has the experience to back up what she's talking about here. We're glad to have Brittney as a part of the Guru Edge, and we hope you enjoyed this episode with Brittney McIver. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we get to talk with Brittney McIver. She is one of the medical device gurus at Greenlight Guru. I'm super pumped to talk to you, Brittney. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm doing really good. It's Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. I don't know what day it is of the week that you're listening, those of you listening, but it's Friday here and we're going to act like it's Friday. So Brittney, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience, and what you do now? Break that up however you like. I asked you three questions in one. So,
Okay, cool. Well, I'll start with I'm a graduate of Clemson University. So I did both undergrad and graduate there. I did my graduate degree in biomedical engineering. The program is bioengineering at Clemson. And so focused on med device, did a thesis project on hernia mesh, really enjoyed that experience. And then from there, I worked for a medical device company as a quality engineer. And so I typically would manage complaints, wore lots of different hats there, but that was my primary focus. And from there, I started working for a polymer contract manufacturing company. So I was the manufacturing/project engineer for the extrusion department, something I didn't have much experience in before that position, but learned a lot about manufacturing, learned a lot about polymers, learned a lot about extrusion, and that was really cool. And from there, I started working at Greenlight. So now
Awesome.
I am a medical device guru and I am on the onboarding and implementation team. So I help customers onboard into Guru at Greenlight Guru and then implement their QMS in Greenlight.
Very cool. I don't know why I'm latching onto this with my mind, but the extrusion of polymers, I imagine extrusion of aluminum, and then I think of injection molding for polymers. I don't know why. Tell me
Yeah.
a little bit more about that.
Yeah, our company did a lot of different things, one of them being extrusion, and that was a big part of our business. And so we did flat die extrusion, which is something that's not typical. A lot of times it's blown film extrusion, but we did micro blown film extrusion for like soft tubing and things like that. We also did flat die extrusion, which is like sheets of plastic. We did it for very specific use cases in the med device field, which is something that is not often done for medical device. We clean room. A lot of times extrusion is not done in a clean room. So it was very cool experience.
So when you go back over your work history, I'm curious, what stands out as maybe the most traumatic point in your history? That's an extreme word, but I'm just curious, is there anything where you really hit a wall and you're like, man, why am I having such a problem with this?
Man, I don't know. I've probably hit a couple walls. Like one of it was I hit a wall before I even got into the med device sphere, like even knew about this side of the medical field. I was pre-med, so undergrad, I wanted to be in medicine. And then I started shadowing doctors and shadowing surgeries. And I was like, all the stuff that they use is really cool. Like, I want to learn more about that stuff. I don't necessarily want to be in the OR. I want to be working on some of this stuff. So that was one of the walls I hit, and I totally pivoted and got into engineering. And then probably when I started my first job as a quality engineer, I had learned about med device and the business, and I had learned about the regulation, and you have to have a quality system. But I think it was so eye-opening actually working in the industry first as a quality engineer. And then I don't think I knew what I was getting into when I was handling complaints for sure. Learned a whole lot though.
Well, I want to talk about the complaints, but I'm curious,
yeah.
getting to shadow those surgeries and seeing the doctors use those medical devices, do you feel like that helped at all? Any translation to when you finally became an actual quality engineer or whatever role that might have been applicable to?
Yeah, for sure. Like just knowing how surgeries go, just like the timing of things and how quickly doctors need things, understanding also the processing of med device, like the cleaning aspect and sterilizing aspect of things, like how medical devices, surgical instrumentation gets from sterile processing techs to the surgery. Just understanding that sort of stuff was really helpful when it came to complaints, especially.
You're giving me some ideas here. This is not at all what I intended to talk about when we get on today. I actually think I may go find some surgeries to get in on. I know a few doctors I could reach out to, but you've got me curious about this. Like I've been in the OR at certain points, but it's all fuzzy memories now at this point. It's been long enough. And this is something I don't know how many engineers get to experience if you're not in product development or upstream marketing. You know what I mean? So that's really
Yeah.
cool that you did that.
Yeah, it was super fun. There's a couple in the US. It's actually kind of hard to get into the OR room if you are not on staff in the
Yeah.
hospital. So one of the things I did was I did a program where I got to go shadow doctors in other countries because they have less stringent restrictions on things. So that was really cool. I went to Thailand and did that.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was really neat. Got to see a lot of different surgeries I would have never gotten to see in the US.
Someone was recently telling me about, I think he's a graduate at this point. He was shadowing a surgeon who was doing a back surgery, taking out an L4. And he handed the pliers to my friend and said, go ahead, take it out. And just use those pliers to take it out just to see certain things like that. It just kind of blows my mind a little bit to think about that. But
yeah, got to see all kinds like brain surgeries, like things that I would never be able to be in the US, got to see. So that was really good. And I also got to see like just the differences of the instruments that are used in different countries and how different countries use things. So it was a good experience.
Very cool. Well, sometime we're going to have to talk a little bit more about that.
We'll have to talk more.
The complaint handling part of your career, I feel like people just sort of fall into that position. Is that accurate? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I think that they're like, was looking at the quality side of things and quality engineer position, didn't know much about complaints and I didn't know how important it was either. So definitely fell into that position.
Well, tell us a little bit about the role first. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it was a small team of quality engineers, and we had really, at the time that I started, I was the main complaint handler. I had people that also reviewed some of the things I did, people I worked with, other cross-functionally that I worked with, but main person handling complaints. So I got to see the whole process, which was cool.
What are the difficulties in that role? Are there things that you look back and you think, man, I wish I had done it differently?
That's a good one.
And I'm going to ask one other thing. I'll let you stall for a second so you can think about it. But one other stalling question I have here is, if you were setting up that role, what are some things that, whether it's in the SOP or the quality management system, how you would structure it in the company, that complaint handling role and how complaints are handled in general by other staff? How would you set that up, or what's the best practice in your mind?
Yeah, it's definitely good to set up the role so that you are working cross-functionally because a lot of times one person can't do it all, right? Because you're going to need to talk amongst the other departments. They'll know more about different aspects. They'd be an expert in different aspects of the process that you go through to complete the investigation. So definitely making sure to cross-functionally work with team members. One of the things I wasn't prepared for was like the sheer volume of complaints sometimes. Like it's a lot to process. And not to say that like, the company is so bad and there's so many complaints, but it's just people have feedback. People have things that they wish that your device would do, or they wish that it didn't do, or they might have opinions. So it's like you're constantly processing that feedback from customers.
And I imagine in your mind, you're categorizing each one as it comes in.
Mm-hmm.
You say, okay, this is like this one, so I'm going to tag it, or however you handle that in some way. What does that look like?
You follow your procedure. There's ways of categorizing complaints. You always look at a complaint and try to determine whether it actually is a complaint or not. So you can get all kinds of feedback from customers, but you're going to want to look back at the definition that you state that is a complaint in your procedure and compare the actual feedback that you're getting and seeing if it's a complaint.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Can you speak to any of the regulations around the complaint handling process?
Yeah, so FDA, I can't remember the actual section. I think it's like, I'm not sure, but
I'll look it up.
complaint
Yeah.
handling. Yeah, it's a separate section. It talks about post-production complaint handling. And there's certain things that you want to consider. You definitely want to make sure that you have a process for escalating complaints, especially reportable complaints. It talks a lot about actions you might take and making sure that you have those specific actions like documented along the way. ISO is a little different. ISO 1345 is a little different, where it has kind of a broader umbrella of customer feedback, where it looks at even production and not necessarily just post-production feedback. So even feedback you might get during production. And so feedback being positive, negative, and how you actually process that feedback. It has a separate section on complaints specifically, though.
Part 820.198 complaint
198.
files.
I was going to say that, but I was like, oh man, I don't want to get it wrong.
I know. Okay. It's interesting. I mean, it is longer than some of the other sections that you'll come across in Part 820. So I know you work with a lot of customers now as a medical device guru, and we could talk about what that is and what you do as a medical device guru. What are some things that you hear, either challenges that they're facing when it comes to their complaint handling or just best practices?
Yeah, volume is a big one. Like I
Yeah.
mentioned, it's just like you want to stay on top of your complaints. I think even in FDA, it says that to make sure that you're closing them in a timely manner, like that you don't have complaints just lingering with no investigation or no actions taken. So that's important. I mean, complaint handling is a huge deal. Even if you're a small company, you're going to need somebody that's dedicated to just carrying those complaints through the process. And larger companies have whole units that handle complaints. So even if you're a small company, it is going to be worth your while to have a dedicated team members that are actually doing that. I think even in FDA, it talks about that. You have to have, I'm looking at it now. What's the wording around it? Designated unit. You have to evaluate complaints by a formally designated unit. So you can't just have everyone in the whole company working on a complaint. You need to have a unit that actually processes it. And then that unit can tag in other departments.
And when we talk about complaint handling being done right or wrong, I mean, there's reasons why it matters. Just a quick anecdote from my past. I was never directly involved with complaint handling, but I remember one time where there was a situation where I think we decided it was not a severe thing. And later on during an audit, that one where we kind of turned it down, it kind of resurfaced and the decision was called into question by the FDA. And so those are some things that you need to consider, I guess, to make sure that your justifications are, I don't know, having not done it myself, I'd lean on you as far as that goes. But I just remember justifications were some of the things that were sticking points for us.
Yeah, for sure. So like any decision you're making, you're going to want to make sure that it's informed and that you have a rationale behind it and that rationale is documented. And that's the thing about complaints. New pieces of information can surface all the time, but you're just going to want to show that you tried your best to get the information, number one, and that based on the information that you were able to gather, that you made a sound decision. It's hard because you want complaint handlers to be pretty decisive. You don't want to be like, oh, I don't know. So decisiveness is a good thing, but you also want to look at everything in it. And if it's not a time to make a decision, it's a time to actually keep going down rabbit holes that you might find. You have to make a decision to do that too.
What are all the different streams that might come into a company as far as those complaints go? Can you kind of speak to that? I can just throw a few off the top of my head. Like I'm assuming a website form by email, just somebody speaking to an employee, but what am I missing? Any others come to mind?
Social media is a big one.
Oh,
So social media, surveys of any kind. Another one is you could just, a device with a note in it could show up at the company in a box, and that's a complaint. They're saying that they're alleging a deficiency. So
can you speak more to the social media?
Yeah, so social media is a huge one. If somebody posts on your social media about an alleged complaint, like this product broke for me, and you have to be able to process that feedback, get in touch with that person.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
learn more. That could be on your Facebook, that could be on any sort of social media, LinkedIn.
So that speaks to the company's social media. What about employees who just maybe they're posting, but they work for that company? What about that?
Like a user of a device, post
No,
on theirs.
an employee of the manufacturer.
Oh, an employee of the manufacturer. If they're alleging a complaint, it would be a complaint, especially if they've actually used the device. And so, yeah, it can be internal as well.
Okay. I think I'm messing up at that presentation or whatever this question. So let's just say I work for, well, we'll use Greenlight Guru. Why not? Greenlight Guru has their own LinkedIn presence. And I have that employee of Greenlight Guru. If I just did a post and someone said, hey, you work for Greenlight Guru, I don't really like this about your module, whatever.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Would that qualify, or do you know if there are any requirements around that?
Yeah, so that would qualify as a date that the company was aware as part, like if you're a part of the company, when somebody reaches out to you, they are notifying the company of an alleged deficiency. So at that point, you want to make sure that your employees know what to do when they get that kind of information, or that they don't like breeze over that information, you want to make sure that they know who that information needs to get to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Almost like a backdoor complaint, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like some customers of med device companies might not know that if they just mention this, it's categorized as a complaint and it's at least followed up on. So they might be complaining about things they don't even know that they are.
Yeah. When you talk about the social media side, my mind just sort of goes to post-market surveillance too. I know they're not exactly the same, but how are those related as far as, I don't know, proactively going out and looking for complaints or looking for negative feedback just that's in the field? Any thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, thoughts are you need to be looking at your social media to see what kind of things your customers are saying about you and evaluating that against your procedures. But on the post-market surveillance kind of string there, it goes into evaluating your QMS against customer requirements. So that's kind of the broad umbrella. So that's why you're going to want to look at that sort of information.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the easy ways that I would just throw out, this is a little bit of an aside, I guess, but if someone was trying to proactively get some of that information, they could I just set up a Google alert just to be super basic, just Google alert on your device or your company so that you're notified whenever someone out there says something that's searchable by Google anyway. That could be one suggestion I would throw out. But
yeah, that's a good suggestion. I'm not sure if we did that. We never got any like that. One of the things that you don't want to happen is like your customer not report the complaint to you, but they report it to the FDA. And then you kind of hear about it through that way. It's good to also communicate to your customers how to give you feedback, the best way to give you feedback. So it's another thing that happened to us one time. So that's not fun when you get a letter from the FDA that's saying that there was a MDR reportable that we never knew about.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if plausible deniability is really real, but yeah.
And then the other thing that's interesting about that is like servicing requests and making sure that your service technicians or reps are able to determine when something is like, how do I use this or how do I service this versus this broke or this is not working as it's intended to work. So
yeah, that's a good point. So let's talk a little bit, if we fast forward into your career, if we talk about just the overarching thought of meeting the guru today. I love that our medical device gurus have such a varying background and varying knowledge. Your master's in bioengineering with the hernia mesh, what are some of the things you learned that might be helpful? I mean, you could plug Clemson. I mean, people might need to just go get a master's in biomedical engineering to really have the thoughts there. But what are some things that you learned that you think, man, it'd be helpful if people had this knowledge?
yeah, I learned a lot about the industry just in coursework, which is really helpful. Learned how to get a device to market, like in the US specifically. And so learned a lot about what a lot of our startup companies are going through that. The other thing was just with research, root cause analysis, a lot of investigation type of skills with that.
So root cause analysis, the thing that I always go to is the fishbone diagram, Ishikawa. I actually call them Fishikawa diagram. And for each one of those legs using a 5 whys, that was my typical go-to when I did root cause. But I'm curious if you learned can you expound a little bit more on the process?
I would say I'm similar to you. So I did the fishbone and then 5 whys, like that was our typical one. Then keeping records of that and making sure that your thought process is documented so that if there are any questions that you have that to fall back on.
Yeah, no, that's good. I remember one time in my career when we just could not figure out one of these problems that we were facing. So we got meat packing paper, like the 4-foot wide roll. We put it across the entire conference room and just had a massive fishbone diagram in marker and just started going at it with sticky notes and everything. Oh,
yeah.
Which is fun until you go to document it.
I know. Yeah. It's fun too when you're like, you don't have all the information, but you need all the information, but it's a complaint. So you're relying on your customer or that hospital to give you information. And then maybe you don't have it all. So you can't make those connections. That comes into play a lot. And so you have to make your best determination with the information you have.
Yeah. So any other advice that you have for companies or recommendations for new companies as they, whether it's approaching their complaint handling or just really anything in general that you would give them?
Yeah, just making sure that you document your process, that you have clear definitions around things, making sure that you investigate your complaints, justify maybe why you're not doing investigation versus when you are, making sure you're following up on some of the actions you take to make sure that they're effective. That's a piece that oftentimes, especially in complaint handling, it gets missed. You just have so many complaints, it's hard to follow up on all of them. I'm trying to think of an example, like if you need to retrain some people, making sure that the training that you did was effective, just closing that loop is super important, documenting everything. And I think keeping your investigation kind of fluid, not so rigid. You're going to want to have some different ways of performing your investigations, typical things that you would do, but investigations can there's so many things in an investigation that can come up. So just making sure that you stay flexible.
So how does that investigation work? What you kind of mentioned that you're really only relying on the information that you've been given. I guess you could have correspondence more with the person who submitted the complaint. What actually goes into that investigation?
Yeah, so you're looking at what was reported to you from the complainant, and then you are looking at your own documentation as well. So you're looking at inspection records, you're looking at purchasing records, you're looking at your DHF, you're looking at your DHR, you're also inspecting if device can come back, you're inspecting the device that comes back. So you might be doing some testing on that to determine what happened. You might have to get a supplier involved. So the supplier might be investigating something on their side. So just depending on what the scope of the complaint is, you might have a lot of different and many investigations going on at the same time to kind of have a summary of what your findings might be.
I really like that breakdown because sometimes we think from the development forward. That's the way my brain thinks a little bit. Being a product development engineer, you look through design controls, risk management, you develop these different things, and then you get a product to market. What you're talking and describing, though, is so we have a product that has an issue. You better have your traceability from whether it's UDI or whatever it is to your DHR, to your DMR, to your DHF, to your risk management. The overarching word that came to mind when you were talking in my mind was traceability. You have to have traceability.
Traceability is so, so important. Even if you're not getting a lot of information from the complainant, sometimes you can deduce just based on your records. Like if they say that they have purchased this part number, well, thank goodness we have purchasing records that say that they've only purchased this lot number. Okay, so then I can take that and run with it. I can go look at records for the manufacturing of that lot and see if anything happened. So even if you're not getting a lot of information from your complainant, you can lean on your own records too.
Yeah, we happen to have a pretty good software system for maintaining traceability. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, just throwing that out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Greenlight Guru, man, sometimes when I look back at the manufacturing engineer, I remember going, first of all, I went to the cabinets where I was looking at the DHR. Then I would say, okay, it's not here. It must be older than this. So I'd have to go to dot control to get the key to the vault. I don't know if you guys had that where you actually walk into this room with more older records, and then I had to search through there, and hopefully they didn't lock the door behind me. That actually happened once.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Traumatic. But anyway, all of the traceability that it took almost a full day really to get a little bit of information that I needed I'll just say it, Greenlight Guru would have saved me full days of work on some of these things. But yeah.
For sure. Especially if you're managing everything through paper. Yeah, it's a lot of searching for things that you don't necessarily know where and how to search for them if you don't have a solution.
Yeah. SharePoint makes it easier and harder in some ways. I did not mean to start this rant. I'm sorry. I've gone down this road, but because I was thinking about that, I was like, is it easier or harder with SharePoint? Because I remember sometimes people would put something in one folder, but not another folder where I thought it should be. I'm like, oh, it's not there, but you could search the whole thing. But that was, anyway, I'll stop. I just go.
When you're having to look at in several different areas, like I mentioned, you're like looking at purchasing records, you're looking at inspection records, you're looking at all these different things, and it's hard if you don't know exactly where things are.
Yeah. Speaking of which, why don't we talk just a little bit about that? You help people implement a quality management system now as a medical device guru. What are some of the things that maybe a piece of advice you would give as they're getting that set up so that they can be quicker to time to value?
Yeah, my quality engineer in me says, get a plan. Get a plan and document a plan. It's going to help you immensely, not only just to like be able to refer back to the plan, but also to get team members on board with your plan to implement Greenlight. My most successful teams get a quality plan or an implementation plan together to implement Greenlight.
That's good advice. I think we forget sometimes that we just think, oh, we're designing an awesome device, but this quality management system is just one of the regulations. But from a company perspective, a quality management system is almost a design project in and of itself.
It is. It so is. And it's hard to talk about, but you want to make sure that your quality management system is this like living, breathing thing, right? You want to plan for it. You want to make sure that you can maintain it. You want to make sure that you are thinking really strategically about your plan. I mean, your quality management system. One of the things I talk about is when you're first starting out, it might be hard to get a quality manual together, right? You don't have all the pieces yet. Like you're doing more of the product development side, and maybe you're doing a lot of documents and training at this point, but quality manual seems like so far off for a lot of teams. But I like to say, if you're not in a position to do a quality manual yet, at least get a quality policy and quality objectives together. That is going to help you determine how the rest of your documentation goes in your quality system.
What do you think would hold someone back from having a quality manual, though? I'm just curious.
It's an interesting subject, right? Because your quality manual is going to talk through all the procedures that you are going to have. It's going to talk about exclusions to your system. And so a lot of teams might not be there yet. And I debate on whether you can have an incomplete quality manual and publish that, or you just have more of a working document as you're developing your quality system in more of a phase-based approach. But at least getting together with your management representatives and talking through a quality policy and objectives, and getting a good vision for how you want to develop your quality system and also monitor and measure it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure there's no one size fits all for that sort of thing. So really making sure that it fits your company and what you're trying to accomplish. So that's really cool. Any other thoughts, best practices, or pitfalls? I don't know. I like pitfalls personally, but for developing those quality management system, just the approach.
Yeah. So one of the things is when you're a new customer, you go through onboarding and implementation. And I always talk about onboarding is when you're learning the software. Like you're working in a sandbox environment, you have your training wheels on, you're learning how the workflows work for you. And it gives you a chance to practice and play around. And then when we get to implementation, it's working in a production environment. It's getting you set up for success as you develop your QMS. So one of the things when we talk about for onboarding is we have workshops. And those workshops are like working sessions where you work with a guru and we talk about questions you have. We talk through best practices. We help you with any roadblocks. But the thing that we always encourage, and the most successful teams do this really well, is doing your pre-work before coming to those workshops. And you've practiced a little bit. You have an idea of the workflow. You've practiced it. Maybe you hit a wall and you're like, I don't know how to go any further. That's okay. We can get you through that. It's when you have no frame of reference and you haven't played with the software yourself that those working sessions end up being a demo. And that's not really what the design is. It's more of us working through some of the issues that you had when you worked through it on your own.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So as a medical device crew, I'm curious, what's one of your favorite things, or have you been in it long enough yet to have a favorite thing that you like working with customers on, or something that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of favorite things. I should start breaking into song. These
You'd
are
be
a
the
few of
first,
my
but I would be.
favorite. These are a few of my favorite things, Julie Andrews style. But I really like helping people on their implementation plans. I like helping people really strategically think about how they can set up their documents workspace to work for them. And I really like helping people get a framework for their project. I think those are the three kind of key things. Maybe that's like the project manager in me, but I really like helping people plan things out. So
Yeah. What's the reason behind that? Do you think you get immediate gratification? You know, you're going to save people time, or?
that's probably it. Or also like just helping them through I don't know. It's like helping them through the thinking process. I don't know. It's like, I've been here, so let me help you get through that and like things I've seen with other customers, like, let me help you save time here.
Yeah. Please don't make the same mistakes I made. That was
Yes,
one that I always cared
exactly.
about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope it's beneficial for those of you who are interested in meeting this guru, Brittny McIver. Feel free to look her up on LinkedIn. I hope you don't mind me throwing that out there. I'll put
That's
your
fine.
LinkedIn in the show notes and
Yeah.
people can reach out, ask any questions. And yeah, enjoyed it. I hope you all have a good rest of your day and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks, Etienne.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, reach out to Brittany on LinkedIn and let her know. Also, I'd personally love to hear from you via email, etienne.nichols@greenlight.guru, or look me up on LinkedIn. You can learn all about what we do if you head over to www.greenlight.guru. We're the only MedTech lifecycle excellence platform. And on top of that, we've built a community where you can go to join the conversation or learn more about the things we discuss on the podcast. You can find those at community.greenlight.guru or by going to academy.greenlight.guru. Finally, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. It helps others find us and it lets us know how we're doing. Thanks again. Take care.